शिला गुरुदेव की जय, श्रीमन महाप्रभु की जय, श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय, गौर भक्त वृंद की जय, गौर प्रमान हरि हरि बोल। So, my pranam to all of you. Good morning from Raleigh. Happy Shivaratri for all of you present today and everyone celebrating today this glorious Vaishnava event in connection to Mahadev. So, this auspicious occasion, we are continuing with our series of lectures of Vaishnava Etiquette. And we will today start our class number 14. And we will kind of continue with a new topic after having spoken for 3 lectures about Diksha mantras, Nam Japa and Sankirtan. Today we will start speaking about Arcana and what's the role, of course, of Vaishnava etiquette in such a realm. So please, the ones who are able to activate your camera, will be happy to have darshan of the Vaishnav's faces. That will be a nice interaction. So first of all, as usual, let's do a brief recap of our previous meeting where we were doing our third lecture on Diksha mantras, Nam Japa and Sankirtan. Especially we focus on Sankirtan in our previous class on Monday. Well, of course, what we mainly said in the beginning, as usual, is we shared some tattva, some bandha, some conceptual orientation towards the very practice of Sankirtan, which is our main sadhana, if you will, Maha sadhana. It's important to conceive, we mentioned this, it's important how important it is to conceive Sankirtan as a crucial aspect of our daily practice and not only limit that to a preaching tactic or something that we will go out to the streets to inspire new people to come to the temple, if you will, which also, of course, there's place for that, but in a proper way. But first of all, that will happen as much as we are embracing Sankirtan as a main limb of our sadhana. So Sankirtan is not merely a preaching strategy, it's not what to say, a musical entertainment or something like that, but Sankirtan is a crucial aspect, Yuga Dharma, established by Mahaprabhu himself. So when defining Sankirtan, we also, of course, have the concept of quantity, congregational chanting, group celebration, if you will, but also the word sam has to do with samyak, or completeness, not only number, but again, in inner participation. So for Sankirtan to really deserve such a name, if you will, is not only enough for us to have a good amount of people participating in that, but that all those members, or ideally, at least starting with ourselves, we understand that to be part of Sankirtan means to surrender ourselves, to surrender our ego in a healthy way, throw that to the fire of sacrifice in order for Sankirtan to become a complete offering. So we also mentioned the conception of cooperation as a crucial aspect of Sankirtan. Love begins with that, with cooperation. And that's the best way to really understand we are all of us in this together. And so each one's contribution is a crucial aspect of what we have to offer to Bhagavan in the form again of Sankirtan. So what else? We, of course, in this connection invoked the third verse of Sikshastakam, which is a really golden rule for us in Gaudiya Vedanta. Is our golden rule for everything, not only for congregational chanting, but for every single step we may want to take in our spiritual life. And then we start to share some other considerations, like, of course, remaining open to the idea that there will be different types of Sankirtan, different styles of it. And we, of course, didn't enter into the details of that. Different modes of kirtan, different kirtans with different modes themselves. So how to approach them properly. For example, we mentioned a nice consideration which will be to start chanting, glorifying Vaishnava, glorifying Sri Guru, then go into Nityananda, Gauranga, then Radha Krishna. Like this gradual sequence a proper conception of how to approach these different levels of transcendence. Also, something that I did not mention last class, is a detail, but I think it's important to mention, and we spoke about that when we spoke about guru, is that when you perform a kirtan, you do not glorify your own guru directly, like, for example, mentioning his name when saying Jai, whatever. No? Instead, you will say Jai Guru Deva, Jai Guru Dev, or Jai Guru Maharaj. But you will mention directly the name of your guru, because there may be other devotees there who have other gurus, and in order to properly honor their particular inspiration, you will invoke a more generic representation of them, and each one will feel comfortable enough to include their guru there. So in a similar way, in kirtan, ideally we should not start kirtan by invoking the pranam mantra of one's guru, because again, this applies to the same idea. I know that in ISKCON this has been established in the times of Prabhupada, and I know that Prabhupada allowed that, I will say that as a way of furthering the faith of his disciples. But if you will, technically speaking, the idea will be just to start the kirtan. You, as for example, our Guru Maharaj, what he does is invoking the Om Jnana Timirandasya verse in the beginning, which is again an abstract address to the Guru principle, and each one may fit in that according to their particular mood. So generally the kirtan will start with the whatever song we are singing, or Panchatattva mantra followed by Maha Mantra. But generally the pranam mantra, of one's guru is more reserved for whatever, puja, personal pranam, daily offerings, and so on. Also, we share some ideas about different melodies, different ragas that are mentioned in the scripture, that are described, passed through tradition to invoke particular types of rasa, particular types of emotions according to every kirtan. These are nice details to consider that will enhance our connection with the very mood and the very feeling that that particular kirtan may want to convey. Also, we spoke a little bit about the main instruments, which are our voice, our heart, our ears. That's the main aspect of the participation. And of course, on top of that, we may have other things like mridanga, kartals, and other instruments. In this connection, we share how Mahaprabhu himself organized his kirtan. That's described in Chaitanya Charitamrita, which different groups, which different instruments, and how each instrument should follow each other and not being independent. We also share some words about that. We shouldn't be like self-centered in our own musical expression, but follow anuga. This is a path of following. So we should be expert in following, of course, and even if you are leading a kirtan leader is expert in leading the kirtan, but also in following the kirtan. And so the two sides of the coin must be there. Of course, there is a place for musical expertise in the context of seva. We also spoke about that. It's not that that has to be dismissed altogether. We can offer all of our attributes and talents to Bhagavan, since those talents, he himself is the active principle in them, it's not our own. Also, we went even to the point of mentioning something about tuning instruments and the volumes of each instrument in order to create some proper harmony. That, again, it may be a relative detail, but may enhance the mood of the offering. We mentioned something about Indian instruments, Indian music. That on one side is not only Indian, but it's there in the Leela, as we see in our Shastras that are revealing how these things take place in the Nityadam. And we will see there are certain instruments and there are considerations of things like raga, tal, and so on. So this is not something to dismiss altogether in the name of Vedic, relative Indian culture, but it's Vedic culture which plays itself out in the Leelas we mentioned in our lecture on Vedic culture. Of course, there is place for other instruments and other modes, but the point is we should be very careful of not validating, if you will, our material samskars through those instruments or through those whatever tones or moods you may be using, and instead we may be validating further and further bhakti samskars, not bhukti samskars, nor mukti samskars. So that's important point to think, and we should pay attention to how that's working on us. Halena Parichate was the fruit that is coming. We share some words about the harmonium and the role of the harmonium, and some nice words from Srila Prabhupada about that, and also the importance of course, absorbing ourselves in Sankirtan of the Maha Mantra, but also the importance of other kirtans which are there to complement and to convey the real intent and purport of the Maha Mantra. Also, we spoke about the possibility of singing in other languages that may not be only Sanskrit or Bengali. There are many kirtans in Hindi, in Oriya, and some other languages for sure, Spanish, English, and so on. So if that's nourishing our participation in kirtan, there's a place for that for sure. And also, we share some words regarding how to participate in Sankirtan in the context of dancing, how to understand that break dancing and body surfing and things like that do not necessarily nourish our participation in the raga mark. So we should also be careful, again, not to make Sankirtan a show, an entertainment event, because Sankirtan is not there to entertain us, to serve us. But we are there to serve Sankirtan and to entertain the possibility of being a servant in such a circle, if you want to make a play of words. So, some brief recap of what we were studying in our previous lecture. And today, as I mentioned, we are beginning with a new chapter, if you will, of this series, where we will be speaking about Vaisnava etiquette, but now in the context of Arcana. So I think this will take at least 2 meetings, let's see if more. So, of course, this is a realm where many things will have to be said about Vaishnava etiquette, but again, hopefully all this in the context of common sense, natural sensibility, and things that will be easy to catch and embrace, not some irrational imposition, whimsical statement, but something that really makes sense with our ultimate ideal. So we haven't, in this way, already till now, at this point, already we have developed our day. Remember, all this is presented a little bit in the context of how the daily schedule of a sadhaka unfolds. So we spoke already about sleeping, waking up, and diverse morning duties such as bathing and achaman, tiglak, chanting our diksha mantras, chanting nam in japa, chanting nam, sankirtan. So now we will continue next by approaching the realm again of ritual in the form or in the context of archana. Since sometimes this usually comes after all these practices in our daily schedule for those who daily engage in archana or at some point, some moment during the day. Needless to say, this won't be a seminar on how to worship the deity, and I won't describe in detail how to render seva to Srimurti in itself and the mantras and all the procedures. That's a whole different section, if you will, or series of lectures dedicated to that, because that requires something much more personalized, more detailed, more extended. And also that's directed to those who have already received Diksha. So of course, this does not apply to everyone and anyone. Of course, everyone can realize some form of worship, daily worship, even without Diksha, at home with some picture of Sri Guru and one Sinstadev. It's not that only those who have Diksha can perform Archana. Of course, some form of Archana is only reserved for those with Diksha, because that will be, Archana will be executed through the Diksha mantras one receives in Diksha. But for others who stay at home, may have some daily simple worship of a picture, or someone who travels a lot, a little bit like myself. One can carry some also pictures of one Sistadev and Sri Guru and make some daily mental offering somehow or other. Again, this is something to be adjusted on a more personalized level. So today we will share in the next class some general advice in connection to how to conceive properly this realm and how to deal with that in practice on some level or another. So of course, as usual, before going to the more practical tips and considerations, we will share probably all along today's class some proper sambandha, conceptual orientation towards this limb of bhakti called archana. Since, as we already mentioned, as much as we have a proper conception of whatever we are addressing, we will address it with proper regard. Vaishnava etiquette has a lot to do with having proper regard, proper appreciation toward that sacred person, that sacred item, that sacred practice, whatever, all the sacredness surrounding our daily bhakti engagements. So to begin with, I'd like to clarify to share some terminological, if you will, clarification regarding the term Archana, because different terms are used in this connection, like puja, like seva, like archana, and so on. So strictly speaking, we could say that in our particular Gaudiya Sampradaya, because there are different Sampradayas that engage in archana, as you may know, that this is a very famous limb of Hinduism altogether, even followers of Advaita Vedanta, what to speak other devotional lineages, engage in archana. So, but in our particular Gaudiya Sampradaya, strictly speaking, although sometimes the word may be used, puja in this case, there's no puja, strictly speaking. Word puja means worship, but mostly in the raga mark, when I say Gaudiya Sampradaya means the raga mark, it's seva. And that's why sometimes when we speak about offenses to the deity, you will hear the term seva aparad. Of course, the term seva can extend to so many other areas beyond the altar, but generally when we speak about serving the deities, we generally won't use the term puja, which implies a little bit more of an Aishvarik, if you will, conception, proper of some other sampradayas like Sri Sampradaya, Madhva Sampradaya, but seva, which has to do, and archana in this term, in this sense, we should understand archana in terms of seva. Although sometimes archana may be used in the context of puja, if you will, in other some lineages and so on. So there is some difference between puja and seva. For example, as I mentioned, puja will be done in other sampradayas like Ramanuja or Sri Sampradaya, Madhva Sampradaya. They will express themselves in those terms. And puja, in that case, means that you offer something by chanting certain mantras, and you offer something to the deity. You chant a particular mantra, you offer whatever upachar, article to Srimurti. But there you won't find a stress on favorable service, if you will, of anukul seva, of having a pleasing attitude toward your istadev, like in Uttam Bhakti, in the Raga Marg. We will find, and that's why we call it seva, because again, seva sometimes is translated as service, but actually it means to please the object of our affection, basically, to really want to please the object of our affection. So that's synonymous with anukul seva, render favorable service, not only doing something that pleases the deity, but with the intention of pleasing the deity. So that's especially in the context of Uttam Bhakti. So seva means to serve in a loving manner, affectionate way, with certain degree of intimacy, as much as we can afford. While in the other sampradayas, like Ramanuja, Madhva Sampradaya, they may have other conception. Not to, of course, criticize them at all, just that's another constellation, if you will, another mood. They will also follow considerations for regarding archana or puja in their case. They will follow in the Varna ashram system, strictly Pancharatrika Vidhi, which means the person has to be qualified, born in the Varna ashram system as a Brahmin. They will have strict considerations in that regard. So in Uttam Bhakti, we will accept Ishwar or Bhagavan in a loving manner, and trying to follow in the footsteps of the residents of Raj. So there is a sense of relationship. We will render some service, hopefully in a pleasing mood. We will, and on that basis of that, we will offer whatever article. But first, we offer ourselves to our deity from a particular vantage point. And what follows is we may offer in this and that, but first it's our own offering. So therefore, the word seva, or sometimes a word that comes also as a synonym to seva, in this case is paricharya. Paricharya is used in Uttam Bhakti mostly, seva or paricharya. Okay, I will be also using the word archana, but I like the word seva and paricharya. I didn't put seva as a title because seva can also be applied to so many things. But I personally like that term a lot, to guru seva, and so on, in every direction. So in our tradition, right from the time of Diksha, as we already explained, one is surrendering to Bhagavan, at least accepting that commitment, that ideal, accepting Bhagavan, Ishwar, Sri Guru, and Bhagavan is accepting the devotee. Of course, this reciprocal dealing is there. So the service starts in that context. While in other sampradayas, something that happens also is that they will invite the deity and worship the deity by chanting certain mantras. They will follow the process according to the BD mark, the by the rules and regulations oriented system. And when the worship is over, let's say, they will send the deity off, where some particular purpose is attained. That happens. The deity is sent off. While in Uttam Bhakti, there is an eternal relationship with the deity. It's not a temporary thing that I will worship for a particular time, particular purpose, but actually, as we will see today, the altar itself is a portal to my eternal idea. So there is no question of inviting the deity and sending then the deity off. Actually, we will offer ourselves and whatever articles we offer with love, with affection. We treat, and ideally, according to the Raga mark, Bhagavan is treated as a family member, basically. The intimacy of Braj is such. Bhagavan is seen with those lens, with the affection of Braj, with Bhagavan is one more member of this family, village family in Braj. So that's a difference between puja and on the other side, seva, paricharya, or archana, as we may want to call it. In other words, here in our bhakti mark, raga mark, uttam bhakti mark, the point is the sadhaka shouldn't feel I have an independent existence. There should not be that sense. We already spoke about that in our lectures on Guru. So if we want to worship Bhagavan, Sri Krishna Mahaprabhu, we have to worship him by becoming his person, if you will, his property, his family member. We have to come under his fold. And that's why, as we already mentioned, generally before starting Archana, we have this Bhuta Siddhi, or this practice or invoking some particular mantra sometimes that help us to orientate our sense of identity. But sometimes even if you really are sincerely engaging in the Raga Marg, you don't even need to invoke the mantra because your whole lifestyle is around that, about being belonging to Sri Guru and Vaishnava and Sri Hari. So that's a Bhuta Suddhi on a daily basis at every step. And that's the very meaning, interestingly, of the word Upasana, which is sometimes translated as worship also. Upasana. Upasana means coming close, similar to Upanishad. Upa asana. Upa means close and asana means to sit, to get closer. So especially this applies for us in the Raga Marg. We perform Upasana, worship, which means for us getting closer to Bhagavan through that worship, attaining higher and higher degrees of intimacy in the context of seva. Sorry. So first of all, I wanted to clarify this regarding the different terms, because even beyond the term, it's nice for us to understand what we intend when we enter the altar, if you will. So Archana, sorry, is a very important aspect of bhakti, Navalakshan bhakti, Panchanga bhakti. Sometimes we find these two divisions. When Prahlad says in the Bhagavatam, Shravan Kirtanam Vishwasmanam Pada Sevanam Archanam Bandhanam Darshan Sakyamatma Nivedanam. Archana is mentioned as one of the 9 main limbs of bhakti. Also, when Rupa Goswami describes the 64 angas of Uttam Bhakti, he describes Archana there, especially in the 5 last ones, which kind of summarize the first 59 practices when he says Sadhu Sangha, Nama Kirtan, Bhagavat Shravan, Mathura Basa, Srimurtir Shradhai Sevana. Again, he invokes the word seva there. He says Srimurtir Shradhaya Sevana. So to serve Srimurti, to render favorable seva to Srimurti with faith. So both in this Nava Lakshan Bhakti, 9 limb Bhakti and 5 limb Bhakti, Archana is there. So it's a very important practice. One of the main things that are generally highlighted in that regard is how in Archana all our senses are engaged. It's a really comprehensive engagement. That speaks a lot about what sadhana bhakti is about, engaging our senses for the pleasure of the Lord of the senses. Krishikena Sivanam Bhakti Ruchate. While in another practice where we may engage in some other sense, we can be chanting japas. My Guru Maharaj will say, you can fall asleep chanting japa, but for sure you won't fall asleep by chanting during Archana, because there's a higher degree of engagement for all of your senses. So our particular tradition, our bhakti tradition, is extremely sensual in that sense, sensory, if you will, engaging all of our senses. It's not a ascetic tradition per se, but it's actually has a lot to do with sense, sense perception, sense engagement, sense gratification towards Krishna for sure, but using our senses in that connection. So Archana is really much tied to it. So let's share some ideas about the very concept of Artavigraha, or Murti, or Deity, as you may like to call the form of Bhagavan appearing in such a way that lends itself to be served by us. And also the importance of the spiritual background of Trimurti, because generally the thing will come, but the deity is just a form, it's a material form, it's made of wood, made of whatever material is made, marble. So are you worshiping an idol? It's that idolatry. Sometimes these questions come, and especially in Hinduism that you see this worship everywhere, no matter the tradition. But actually, as we know, this has nothing to do with idolatry, but it's real spirit of worship. Because according to our tradition, matter is one energy of Bhagavan. It's in the service of Bhagavan. And as much as matter is engaged in the service of its source, it becomes imbued by that influence. As much as matter, Maya Shakti, if you want to call it, is put under the influence of Bhakti Shakti or Swarup Shakti, matter becomes spiritualized. In Christianity, they have this term of transubstantiation of matter in the Mass, where the bread is, at one point, the wine is seen as the blood and the flesh of Christ, or whatever. At one point of the ceremony, we speak about something happened there. I sometimes give a more ordinary example, if you will. But if you, I don't know, if you were a fan of some musician who died, I don't know, 50 years ago, and suddenly I brought you the guitar that the musician used in his last concert, for you, that guitar is not just a piece of matter. For you, the person is present there on some level or another. It's imbued with the presence, the influence of that personality. Of course, this is not exactly the same example of Archana Vigraha, but my point is, we even have a sense of this immaterial perception. While in this case, we are speaking about, again, Bhagavan entering a particular form, and the most important point here is by the invitation of the sadhu. The sadhu has some bhakti in his heart, so according to that bhakti, Bhagavan is present in the heart of the sadhu, and he or she will invite Bhagavan to reside in a particular form, and Bhagavan is forced to do so, as we know. He has but no option but to appear there, because he's where bhakti is, where love is, Bhagavan is there. So the point is, the deity is taking, the deity is the external form of the hearts, the sadhu of the heart. The devotion, the love that the sadhu has, it takes a particular form in the form of Trimurti, as Prabhupada will say, in a form that we can handle it. I remember once I was in Colombia, I think like 10 years ago or so, and we were in some program after Harikata, Arti was there, and one person came, a newcomer, and told me everything was very nice, but there's something difficult for me to digest, and it's that, and he pointed to the altar. He said, I mean, you have been speaking about God being infinite, unlimited, but how, again, and this is the classical question, you are limiting the unlimited by reducing him to that particular form, by saying that he's there, he's unlimited. So how can the unlimited be limited to a form? And of course, I reply by invoking famous quote by Srila Sridhar Maharaj. He will say, how can you limit the unlimited to not be able to be present in a form and still remain unlimited? So unlimited means unlimited possibilities. So unlimited means he can be present in a form and still remain unlimited. I mean, that really conforms to the idea of unlimited, much more than saying, no, unlimited cannot have a form. Actually, by saying that, you are limiting the unlimited. And that's what many spiritual practitioners say. If you speak in a form, he cannot have a form, he cannot have too many names, he cannot do that, he cannot do that. And in the name of not limiting the unlimited, the only thing that they are doing is limiting him more and more. So our tradition presents a much more comprehensive idea. How can we limit the unlimited to not being able to have a form and still remain unlimited, to have a spiritual form, a form that facilitates loving interaction instead of obstructing it. So that's the very idea of Trimurti. So we need certain philosophy to approach Trimurti, because if not, we may mistake that, of course, for a material form, but that will be our only our projection there. And this, of course, that may be especially complex if, as I mentioned, many of us or some of us may come from a Western background with some Christian DNA or whatever, when sometimes there will be no image worship there. And because of that, many people may consider Hinduism like profane or polytheistic. They worship everything. As once someone asked one sadhu, why you worship the cow? And he said, well, actually we worship even the broom that we use for cleaning the temple. So like everything is worshipable in Hinduism, but it doesn't mean idolatry. People may see our altar, sometimes they will see stones in our altar. We are worshiping Shilas. Some people may see a form like Jagannath, which may seem like a totem for them and whatever, voodoo totem. So again, some bondage required to approach the principle of the deity. And it has nothing to do with idolatry, because what's idolatry? Idolatry means a worship of that which is not God. And actually, most of us, at least for most of the people, I mean, not necessarily sadhakas, but we also go through that in some parts of our day, we generally live in that conception sometimes. We are worshiping that which is not God. Of course, in one sense, everything is God from the Abed perspective. Everything is linked with him. But on many occasions, we are dealing with reality as if God does not exist. So that's idolatry. So even in our process, work in progress as sadhakas, we are being idolatrous in some moment, even though in theory, officially, we believe in God, we worship him, but at some moment we relate with things as if God is not there. So that's idolatry. And idolatry, of course, comes in a lot of different forms. Today, especially, in a much more subtle way than bowing down to a golden calf, as you know the story, Christian story. And sometimes it may take the form of choosing the wrong priorities, not having God as the topmost priority. Someone else is your God. So that's idolatry. You choose the wrong priorities, or sometimes trusting in the wrong things, putting our confidence where it does not belong. All those things are extensions of idolatry. So it's a subtle point, and it's not so easy to be free from all types of idolatry. So we should spend some time about thinking about that. For example, as disciples, we may do something in relation to Sri Guru. We may express idolatry in relation to Sri Guru, not because we should not worship Sri Guru, but because we may approach him or her in an idolatrous way. We may think that we are disciples only because we underwent some formality, like changing our name or getting some mark on our foreheads or a pat on our back in front of a burning banana or whatever, and a couple of swahas here and there. And end of the story. And for us, that's I'm a disciple now. Now we have the immigration document required for the pearly gates, whatever, the stairway to heaven. But it's not like that. I mean, it requires much more consideration for not make that sacred moment a form of idolatry. But again, I don't want to lose myself. Let's go back to the topic, deity worship. So going back to the issue, deity worship and the conception of idolatry, there is this famous saying that says, beauty lies, or sometimes sin, depending on the case, in this case, beauty lies in the eye of the beholder. So here we could extend the idea of the sin of idolatry lies in the eye of the beholder, not in the beholded in itself, but in the eye of the one who is contemplating, which is the conception behind the eye, which is the eye behind the eye. That will speak if there's real seva, real archana, or idolatry. For example, the gross idolatress, I don't know what's the word, the one who engages in idolatry, but no problem. The gross one is supposing, for example, the absolute has a form made of earth, and we'll worship that with a gross conception. And the subtle idolatry may think the absolute has no form altogether at all. That will be another form of idolatry, if you will. For example, those who follow the radical non-dualism of Advaita Vedanta, they engage in abstract thinking in that sense, neti neti, and they call that worship, maybe. But actually, we could say, on the strength of our theistic conception, that that's a very subtle form of idolatry. God has no form, there is no form altogether, there's no individuality, and so on. So if we ask ourselves how to get rid of all form of idolatry, which is important because we are speaking about render seva to Srimurti, which is the opposite of idolatry. Well, we may find the answer to how to get free from all idolatry in the Bhagavad itself, which says to us that basically the most important thing here will be to accept the power of the Absolute, the will of the Absolute to take the initiative, if you will, to reveal himself, to descend to our plane of understanding in the form of Trimurti. To understand the Absolute, the Infinite can show himself to the finite in particular ways, authorized ways, if you will. So when we say the deity of Krishna, of course, I mean Krishna himself. That's an important point that we are starting to unfold here. The deity is Krishna. It's not the deity of Krishna. As we say, the name of Krishna is Krishna, who is, and so on. So the deity or God is not created in the image and similar features as the human beings, but actually the opposite. We are created to the image of God, if you will. Some similar conception to what Christianity may say there. So this deity, we may call deity, is actually a very generous extension of Bhagavan's direct grace. And so in order to further understand this idea, let me invoke one fivefold definition that Ramanujacharya gives, but also is invoked by our Gaudiya Acharyas, of this fivefold way in which the Absolute extends himself to us. So he says, Parabyuha Vaibhav Antaryami Archa. So there we have the fivefold representation. Para, Vyuha, Vaibhav, Antaryami, and Archa. Para means original supreme Godhead, the source of every other forms of the divine. Swayam Bhagavan Sri Krishna for us. So Para. Then we have Vyuha. Vyuha means his extended self, or Prakash sometimes, expansion of Bhagavan into the spiritual world, as we may speak in terms of Baladev or some other types of Prakash or Vyuha. Then we have further extension called Avatar. We will see that these are further and further extensions. Avatar or Vaibhav. Vaibhav, as Ramanuja calls it, which will be our conception of Avatar, which means from up to down, the divine entering into this world without being affected by it, for the purpose of redemption. So Para, Vyuha, Vaibhav, and then Antaryami, which is not only entering into this world, but entering into every heart. Antaryami, the Paramatma, as we may call. A further extension, further localized extension, more and more localized. And finally, Archa, which is the deity form. Not only in every heart, but appearing outside of our heart, if you will. That deity that is inside our heart, appearing outside of our heart in a particular way by the grace of the Vaishnava, the Sadhu. So it's an interesting way that we may see how the grace of Bhagavan unfolds himself in a way that gets closer and closer and closer to us. So Parabyuha Vaibhav Antayami Archa. So it's important to really appreciate how much mercy is condensed in that particular form that we consider Archa Vigraha of Srimurti. So as I mentioned, in the same way, the deity is not different from Krishna. So we may say the deity of Krishna, but actually is a redundant expression. Krishna is the deity. As the same way, Abhinatvam Namanamino. Between Nam and Nami, the name and the named, there is no difference. In the same way that the Srimad Bhagavatam is a book, we may say. Bhagavatam is a book about Krishna's life. But also we say the Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of the Godhead. So it's Bhagavan himself. So the Bhagavatam is a book about Krishna, but it's Krishna. Srinam is the name of Krishna, but it's Krishna. So similarly, the deity of Krishna, or Radha, Mahaprabhu, whoever, is actually Krishna himself. So that's maybe just a semantic thing, but it's important that we have the proper conception in our heart about that. And it's not only it's not only Krishna himself, but it's a very specific Krishna that will appear in a particular way, a particular aspect of Bhagavan that Sri Guru will invoke and choose to invite to descend in a place, in particular place, in a particular mood, a particular form to become the master, if you will, of that particular area. And that point was made by Srila Prabhupada when he named some of his deities, Radha, Landnishwar, Radha, Parisishwar. There are many degrees of significance to that, but one of them is this particular form of Bhagavan has become the master of this area. And there's a nice story once of one lady who was the owner of one jewelry shop, and she had a dream with Srimati Radharani. So Sri Radha, in the dream, she was asking her a particular jewel she had in the shop, that she wanted to wear that jewel. So the lady in the dream say, I have no problem of giving you that jewel, but my point is, how do I know who you are? Which Radha do you are? So she understood this is Radha in the form of Archavigraha. So which Radha you are? Because she was an Indian lady, so you can imagine there were lots of murtis of Sri Radha around the area. So she wanted to know, how do I know who you are? So she said, I'm the Radha of such and such math, and so on. Such temple in the dream. So she woke up, and the next day in the jewelry shop, a brahmachari from that particular math was entering there asking for donations and asking for for dakshina and for the temple. So this is one of many stories that show how not only Krishna is the deity, but a particular form identified with that particular situation. Very interesting, very specific. Again, Raga Marga is the path of specificity, if you will. So with that in mind, let's share some words about what's the meaning of entering into the altar for us Gaudias. What does it mean to enter the altar? How to deal with such a reality? So entering the altar means basically to receive an invitation to immerse ourselves deeply into the heart of Sri Guru. Remember, the deity is the heart of Sri Guru being carved out, if you will, taking a form outside in the form of the deity, but that deity is in the heart of Sri Guru who is inviting that particular form to manifest outside. So entering the altar means entering to the heart of Sri Guru. Actually, we are entering the altar by the blessings of Sri Guru, in the service of Sri Guru. We pray to him before ourselves engaging in seva there. So the altar, in other words, is a manifestation, external manifestation of all those things that internally are feeling and overflowing the heart of Sri Guru. And she very generously wants to share that with us, extend that with us, making that available, making that so it may become also part of our own heart. Sri Guru wants his heart to be part of our own heart. So this altar represents that. Another way we can say the altar represents the Yoga Pith. Yoga Pith will be like the transcendental stage or platform eternally on which all the different leelas connected to the particular Istadev in that altar are playing themselves out. I mean, again, this is not a passive situation in the altar. The whole leela of whatever, Sri Radha Krishna, Sri Krishna Balaram, Gaur Nityananda, Gaur Gadadhar, whoever, the altar represents in that stage, that scenario. So these leelas are going on. So that's why it's important that we may be very careful not to get overtly attached, extremely attached to the external form of the ritual, as if it's the all in all when engaging in archana, because our worship may be conducted in a mechanical way without understanding the inner purpose of that, without understanding what's going on there in the altar, who are the people, the personalities there, if you will. So we should be very careful to not idealize Sri Murti according to our own imagination or our own perception or our own relative necessity, and projecting that into the altar and feeling that's what Krishna is about. He's limited to whatever I need and I pray him for. No, we should be properly educated with who is each one of those personalities and relate with them properly. not only related to them according to how I feel that the deity is interacting with me in this particular stage of my life, but what's going on in that stage already. So for that, we should take shelter of Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, to receive proper knowledge, revealed knowledge, perfect knowledge about who is who in the altar. And of course, when I say who is who, also important to mention in our particular lineage, of course, the main deities that are worshipped are Radha Krishna, for those with affinity for Madhurya Bhav, Radha Krishna or Gaur Gadadhar in the context of Gaur Lila, or for those with affinity for Sakya Bhav. Of course, Priyanarma Sakya Bhav also can worship Radha Krishna because Madhurya Rasa element is present there in one form, but also Krishna Balaram, Gaur Nityananda, sometimes Mahaprabhu himself alone is being worshipped. Of course, Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra in some cases, and some other cases like Panchatattva, Narasimhadev, Giriraj. Of course, we want to enter into the details of the different nuances of each worship, but those are like the main deities, and each of them, of course, have a particular conception, if we will, attach to them that we should understand and worship them according to. So, for most of us, let's say, regarding entering the altar, worshiping Srimurti, most of us, we will say that Bhagavan in the altar is performing what we may call Mona Lila. Mona Lila, Mona means silence. Silent Lila means we don't hear the deity speaking, we don't see the deity moving, dancing, jumping, playing, eating, generally. So he's performing that Lila, if you will, for us, mainly because we are not yet, if you will, willing to engage in such level of committed worship, not to feel ourselves discouraged, but just to understand that that's still going on, even though I'm not seeing that and I'm not hearing that, due to the presence of certain artists in our heart that are clouding, if you will, our capacity to perceive the ultimate reality of the altar in a pure way, in an alive, live, living way, real way. So in the beginning, we should conduct our worship with proper knowledge, understanding, and proper faith. Faith that Hari is there in Srimurti, fully present. And that faith comes from Sri Guru and the Vaishnavas, who are the ones, as my Guru Maharaj will say, who originally point to us, Srimurti is non-different from Bhagavan himself. If we bow ourselves down to deities because the sadhu told us to do so. So basically that's the conclusion we should say. No? And in this connection, it's important to underline the importance of how to relate with the Vaishnavas. Because not in the name of worshiping Srimurti dismiss sadhu sangha. Actually, on the contrary. Because as much as saintly people are offended or neglected, as much as in that same level, Bhagavan in the form of Srimurti won't be present in the altar for us, if you will. And that's the quality of the Kanishta Bhakta, say the scripture. Kanishta Bhakta, the Bhagavatam described, says Kanishta Bhagavata is someone who has some relation with the deity, but does not know how to relate with other people, with Vaishnavas. Considers the deity more important than the sadhu. Considers Krishna more present in the deity than in the sadhu. Well, actually, in our tradition is the opposite, if you will. We worship Trimurti through the sadhu, and we understand Trimurti through the sadhu, by the sadhu's education and mercy. If not, we find a lot of this. For example, I don't know, some Hindu may go in India to a temple to see the deity, and we put some rupee in the donation box and we'll pray to Srimurti, give me blessing for my family, for my job, I want a new car, please Bhagavan. And that's all. And we'll leave the temple, and maybe there was some Harikatha going on, a sadhu was opening her heart through Harikatha, but that person did not pay attention to that, just went right to the altar, put the coin, pledged for some blessing, and left. So that's an example of Kanishta mentality. Bhagavan and me, no need of understanding the importance of the sadhu. There's a nice story in this regard. I remember once Srila Siddhar Maharaj said that when he was initially visiting the Gaudiya Math before officially joining, he went to one ashram where on the first floor in the street, I don't know if you in English call first floor, the room that is on the level of the street, there was the temple there. Mahaprabhu was in the altar. And on the second floor, above the altar, was the room of Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta. So at one point, Srila Siddhar Maharaj asked, why why the deity is down and your guru is on the deity, above the deity. And so one devotee told Srila Maharaj, and he liked a lot the answer. He said, yes, on the first floor, Mahaprabhu is there in the altar. But on the second floor, Mahaprabhu is also there in the altar, in the heart of our guru. And in that Mahaprabhu is much more present there, if you will, much more active. That altar is special, the heart of Sri Guru. And the altar in the first floor is just an extension and manifestation of that altar. So that's why the topmost, if you will, Mahaprabhu is on the second floor. It's a way of saying, again, we are not speaking worse, better, but emphasizing the active principle of the sadhu. And that, again, the Madhyam Bhakta above the Kanishta will start to appreciate the sadhu and will see Bhagavan in the devotee. And that what makes a Madhyam and not the Kanishta. And an Uttam will be Bhagavan everywhere. The deity will be extended everywhere, as my Guru Maharaj will be universalized. What else? Of course, regarding offering, something important to consider in this connection is that before even offering whatever we may offer in the altar, it's to say that first, whatever we offer externally has to be first offered internally. The scriptures say that for someone engaged in sadhana bhakti, the engagement in seva and archana with different paraphernalia and items will be incomplete if it's not accompanied by manasa puja or mental worship. That means if you're offering something externally, you're offering that internally first, in your heart. So basically in this way, we see that although archana is engaging all of our external senses, its central aspect has more to do with the inner meditation that will be conducting that seva. So that's why I'm emphasizing all these initial elements that will nourish our meditation on how to approach properly the altar. So the point is one should offer everything. That's a nice concept also. We should offer everything to begin with ourselves to Bhagavan, but we should not also only offer incense or fire or water, but also we should offer, for example, the clothes. If we are not wearing some remnant from a sadhu, and we buy some new clothes or someone gives us a gift, ideally, traditionally, you offer all that first to the deity. Because again, if you offered yourself to the deity first, whatever comes to you is also part of that offering. Even medicine, you can offer to the deity. Of course, you won't put that into a plate, but you can just present in front of the deity on the picture and pray for that. Even if, I don't know, someone may say if medicines may be alcohol, some homeopathic medicine, so are we to offer that to the deity? But the point is, everything is offered because there is no independence. Try to get the point. In our Sampradaya, there's no independent life. Whatever comes to me belongs to my deity. The Vaishnava will feel like that always. Even one's own mind, body, residence, everything is offered to Bhagavan. There's no sense of separate ownership. So in this way, through Archana, we receive this is really most valuable opportunity to deeply develop our inner eye of service. And this sometimes is called Sevya Darshan. Darshan means sight, vision, to Sevya, to see in the context of Seva. That's called Sevya Darshan, which means to look at everything with the eyes of Seva, to replace gradually in this way the other type of so-called vision, which is more blindness, that a vision, Bhogya Darshan, which means to see everything in terms of sense enjoyment for us, personal, separate enjoyment, selfish exploitation. So gradually, as much as our worship matures and grows more and more, expands, our inner service will become more and more prominent and more specific and more ecstatic. Sometimes that's called Bhava Seva. The main thing will be going on internally. That's why sometimes very advanced devotees in their seva to Trimurti, externally, they may not do too many things, may not offer too many things because everything is going on internally. So much is put in the inner world. Of course, that's not an excuse for us to imitate that. If we don't have that capacity, we should engage as much as we can externally and to buy and have opulent things for the deity and engage our money and time and energy in that direction. But if you are investing all yourself already inside, externally, you may, offer just unsalted bread to the deity as Sanatana Goswami was doing, but with full love and devotion, and the deity will be just that's Bhava Seva. You will worship the deity according to the bhav that has descended. That won't be found in any Archana Padati, any handbook of worship. Do this, do this. In the beginning, you have to invoke certain mantras and worship in a particular way. But as this matures, and give me some few minutes with your permission, the worship will, again, won't be worship, will be loving seva. In the beginning, there should be something of that and what to speak in the goal. And we have so many stories that tell us about this, that Krishna is actually in the deity and how it reciprocates with his sevaka if the devotee has pure love. Famous story of not only Madan Mohan with Sanatan Goswami and the unsalted bread that we all of us know, but before being with Sanatan Goswami, Madan Mohan was with one Brahmana called Chobe in Mathura. And it's also a very nice story that he was at his house and the wife of the Brahmin was cooking and serving the deity at the same time, and the children at home was playing with the deity, and the deity was jumping from the altar and playing with them. And at one point the mother was brushing her teeth and at the same time preparing the offering for Madan Mohan, apparently without following any etiquette, but with full bhav, treating Madan Mohan as a family member. So once Sanatan Goswami was going there doing like bhikshu, like mendicate, asking for alms, begging for alms. And he saw that and said, oh, no, this is not like this. You should worship the deity in such a way. First, you should have a bath. You should hear the lectures on Vaisnava etiquette by Padmanabha. You cannot worship the deity like that. First, you have to brush in the teeth after having a bath, then put tilak, achaman, then enter the altar. But you are just brushing your teeth simultaneously while preparing the offering for the deity. What's this? So the lady said, oh, I didn't know. Sorry, I was worshiping him in this. I will follow that tomorrow. So the next day she's doing that. And the deity said, I don't like this. I don't like this mood. No, I don't like, it's boring. It's not so affectionate. It's cold-hearted. We'll go back to the previous standard. So when Sanatan Goswami heard that the deity say this to this lady, he said, oh my God, you have so much love for Madan Mohan. And Sanatan Goswami had some hope that Madan Mohan may go with him, but he felt, oh, they have so much love for him that he won't come with me. But eventually Madan Mohan revealed in a dream to that family and say, I want to go with Sanatan. So he went, but eventually more Leelas, as we know, happened there. And so many other, the deity of Radha Govinda also sometimes used to ask from the Pujari some special preparation to eat. From Chaitanya Charitamrita, we find about the story of Sakshi Gopal, and witness Gopal, who walked with his devotee, who ate every day, who spoke with him. We have the famous story of Sirachora Gopinath, who steals some sweet rice from Madhavendra Puri, and many other. Raghunananda Thakur giving to eat something up to eat to the deity as a child, and the deity eating everything, and the parents are not believing him. So again, this is the goal. Eventually, deity will start to speak. Now, first we have to perform deity seva through Sri Guru, and gradually the interaction will become more real, more and more real, to the point that, again, you will tell to the deity, I don't have salt, as Sanatana Goswami said. You want salt? I don't have salt, and I know you. You want salt, then you want ghee, then you want sweets, then you want this, then you want that. I'm a mendicant. You agree to come with me on those terms. If you don't like it, you can go back to the previous place. Sanatana Goswami was dealing with the deity like that. You won't find that type of interaction in any worship manual. So we cannot imitate that. That will be a gradual process. And again, in the beginning, maybe the deity is not speaking to us, but why is not speaking to me, Mona Lila? Because I do not behave as if Krishna is really there fully yet. So he's reciprocating accordingly. The same way as we chant without attention, and Krishna in the form of Srinam will reciprocate accordingly to our lack of attention or our lack of faith. So it's like this. It's not that Krishna is hiding purposely from us. So basically it's gradually. And as my Guru Maharaj said, also Krishna knows our present level of capacity to accept service and give service to him. Because as much as the deity starts to speak, deity will say, I want this, I want that, I want that, and I want that, and we won't have time for anything else in our life. We will only have to live for satisfying one after the other of the demands and desires of Krishna. So maybe we are not fully ready to do so. So that's why the deity is not speaking yet. So it's more passive, and we open the altar and we worship, we close the altar, we continue with some other aspects of our lives. We open, oh, this, the deity. So it's a gradual process. It's a gradual process. So in this way, Archana is an interesting practice because, again, we are not yet on Sanatan Goswami's level. At the same time, we are not materialistic people who thinks this is a statue, idolatry. So it's something in between, a sadhaka. So Archana has to do a lot with this, the realm of ritual. The realm of ritual means I have 1 foot in the spiritual world and I have 1 foot in the material world. Still on the material world, engaging my senses, dealing with material, quote unquote, elements, but at the same time, recite in a certain way, following certain rules, invoking certain mantras in such a way that they will take to a spiritual experience. And with the spiritual knowledge helping me to understand this is not a material affair. So actually, this is ritual. So the real ritual for us is to conform ourselves to something greater than ourselves. That means to enter the altar, basically. You are conforming yourself to something greater than yourself. That in that moment, the altar becomes a portal, because that's what the altar is actually for us, a portal into a window to the spiritual world, Srila Prabhupada would say. Once my Guru Maharaj mentioned that, as much as you understand that, the idea of Archana, he says, is to universalize, or to realize, if you will, the universality of your deity. Not only think Krishna is there inside that particular corner of my house, in the altar, on the temple, but eventually the deity is everywhere. The Kanishta Adhikari has that mentality. The deity is only in the temple. So he goes to the temple, behaves in a very sacred way, goes out of the temple, the deity is no longer here, and starts to behave otherwise. But as much as you progress, you realize, no, the deity is everywhere. The universality of your deity. This is the vision of the exalted devotees. What to speak of Sri Radha, one of her names is Krishna Mai, which means she's filled with Krishna. She's seeing Krishna inside, outside of herself, and inside of herself. Wherever she's putting her side, Krishna is there. Krishna is there. So as much as we realize that, as much as we realize the universality of our deity, there won't be place for a moral gap, for example, moral lapse, as we may be having yet today, because we may think, oh, Guru is not looking at me, the Vaishnavas are not here, so I can do this now. But as much as you become aware of the universality of this, you will behave in the same way that you behave in the temple, because you understand the temple is everywhere. The deity is everywhere, therefore the temple is everywhere. Ideally, in my own heart, Mama Mandir, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur will say. The ideal, my Guru Maharaj will say, is that the whole world becomes an udipana. Udipana means a stimulant, something that is kindling, kindling, putting more wood to the fire of our passionate devotion. The whole world will become eventually an udipana. That was Mahaprabhu's eyes. He saw the ocean, he saw the Jamuna, he saw a sand dune, he saw Govardhan. Sri Radha sees a tamal tree, she sees Krishna. She sees a deer, she sees Krishna, Krishna Sara deer. She sees a cloud, she prays for having wings so she can fly and embrace the cloud, because for her it resembles Krishna's hue. So in this way, gradually, the deity will be universalized. But again, all this has to do with bhakti and the development of bhakti in our heart. As much as that's there, deity will be there. For example, in Hari Bhakti Vilas, we find lots of details about establishing a temple, installing the deity, worshiping the deity. I won't go into many of those. We will only touch some of them in the next class. But for example, regarding installing a deity, interestingly, it mentioned that the main point of the installation ceremony is called Pram Pratishta, which basically implies that this guru is invoking the presence of Krishna into that particular form. So it is mentioned that there are so many other details about the installation of the deity, but what is generally done is all those details are mainly to instill faith in the general people about God's presence in the deity. It's not that all those things are required. If the sadhu agrees with, invites Krishna in that form, Krishna is there, because bhakti is there, Krishna is there. Prahlad saw Krishna in a column in the palace of Hiranyakashipu. So the point is, where the sadhu is wishing something, that's the active principle. But all the other details and fires and mantras and many things that my Guru Maharaj will say, someone will say, oh, there's a big fire there. Something important must be happening. Some people think in those terms. They need some external display. But the main thing is, again, the inner attitude. So with that attitude, we have to approach the principle of Srimurti. As Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, we shouldn't feel, I am looking at Srimurti, I am seeing it, but he is seeing me. I'm being seen by Srimurti. That's it. I'm the object and Srimurti is the subject, not the opposite way. Srimurti is not a tanmatra, an object of my sight. As Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta said, do not try to see Krishna. Try to act in such a way that Krishna wants to see you. That's the most fundamental thing. The same is with the deity. Do not try to look at the deity and force your own material eye into the deity, but try to behave in such a way, render seva in such a way that Trimurti, you are taking the attention of Trimurti, of Bhagavan. So in this way, we should learn to have darshan of Trimurti. It's not just I stand before deity and put my eyes in that direction, I'm having darshan. Not necessarily. So again, it's important to, as a conclusion, to emphasize this point. We shouldn't speak about the deity of Krishna. It's Krishna himself, Archa Avatar, sometimes it's called, the divine descent of Bhagavan in that particular form. That said, even in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Pratima Naha Tumi, Sakshat Brajendra Nandana. So Pratima Naha means, Pratima means statue. Naha means no, you are not. To me, you. So you are not a statue, Mahaprabhu say. Sakshat Brajendra Nandan. You are directly Sakshat Brajendra, the son of Nanda Maharaj, Brajendra Nandan. So that's the ultimate conclusion of Sridhar Mahaprabhu said the same with Srinam. When someone asked Mahaprabhu, what's Srinam? He said, Tamala Shamala Tushi Sri Yashoda Stanandaye, Krishna Namna Rudhiriti, and so on. But the point is, Tamal, for me, Srinam is the one who has the color of the Tamal tree and the one who sucks the breast of Jashoda. In other words, he said, for me, Srinam is non-different from Krishna himself. And here he's saying the same. Pratima Nahatumi Sakshat Brajendra Nandan. The Murti is not in a statue, is directly the son of Nanda Maharaj. So gradually we should develop, imbibe ourselves into this vision of and getting accustomed to deal with deity in those very personalized terms. So let me finish today's katha with one nice, charming story, which has Srila Siddhar Maharaj as his main character in this case, and I think it's, maybe you may know it, it's a very well-known one. And it's when after he started his own mission, Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat, Srila Siddhar Maharaj, he used to live in his ashram on the banks of the Ganges in Navadvip. And it is said that at one point the government tried to take away the few acres of land that belonged to the mat. So there was some problem at that time. In those days, the government had made a law, if you will, that nobody could own more than 1 acre of land. Every person can only have 1 acre of land. And the ashram had 4 acres. So the government wanted to take 3 of them. So you can imagine what a disaster this would have been for the ashram. The ashram was already built and so many things were in place, and the government came with this idea. And so the government very quickly filed a court case trying to take the land from the ashram. So Srila Siddhar struggled very hard for that not to happen. And he succeeded. But how he succeeded? Interestingly, he went to court. So we can see now the level of Yukta Vairagya and the different expressions of Archana, how the deity can engage us in so many ways of seva. So in court, Srila Siddhar Maharaj was there and he asked, okay, the math, 1 acre per person. Our math consists of 4 people, Guru, Gauranga, Radha, and Krishna. That was his case. Indian laws. As you will see, Indian laws are very different. You won't be able to say that in Western country, but in India, that's allowed. So he'd say, yes, it belongs to the deity. So it belongs to this 4 person, Guru, Gauranga, Radha, Krishna. So he declared that's 4 people, so we can own 4 acres. So the judge, he said to him, it's more complicated than what you say, because you can only have 3 acres, because Radha and Krishna are married, he said, and a couple can only have 1 acre. That all this was going on in the court in India. So interestingly, Silasya Maharaj start to quote many scriptures that gave evidence that Radha and Krishna are not married, actually, but actually their relationship is one of parakia. They are lovers. So eventually he say, so still we can have the 4 acres, and each one can have their own acre. And in this way, Silasya Maharaj won the case and saved the ashram from great difficulty. So, but I shared this story for you to have a grasp, even on a cultural level, how even in a country they can conceive, okay, the deity is owning the place, and how one should conduct. And of course, this story not only is showing not only how much the deity are actual persons, but also how our seva to them can take many forms outside of the altar, quote unquote. And we should be willing to give ourselves to engage in them for the pleasure of our Istadev, if that even implies a court case or whatever. So some ideas I want to share with you today. As I mentioned, today was more of an introductory, if you will, lecture on the theory behind the form of the deity, Archa Vigraha, Srimurti, and during our next lecture, we will start to analyze more practical ways of dealing, having this proper appreciation and regard for it. So, well, we have some few minutes if there are any questions, so you can unmute them yourselves. I already make that option available. So I don't know if there are any questions.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes. Who is speaking? Tadas?
Tadas, yes.
Yes, tell me.
Yeah, I would like to ask, it's about question about deity worship, but it's like my personal case, and I would like to know your opinion or your comments. So just when I started to chant, I used to have these strange visions or something like that, and in one of these visions there was me like sitting in front of like home altar, and I took it as a sign that I need to have a deity. And at that time I didn't know anything about about the offenses or something like that. It was just maybe after month or two of practicing, and I purchased like a simple brass deity of Krishna, and I started just imitate the worship that I used to see in temple, or like some basics, and I continued to do that. And then I was traveling in India, and in Mayapur I went to one lecture where I heard about all these like bad offenses and stuff like that, and and I was like, what am I doing, and then I asked to Maharaj, who was like giving that class, so okay, so what should I do? Like, should I throw him to the Ganges or what? And he was like, he didn't want to give me an answer, and he was like, I don't know what you should do. And then then I met a person who is like I don't know how to say that, but he's like a head of deity worship department in ISKCON, something like that. And I knew that he is like that his position is like that. So I went to him and I asked him like, so I explained all the situation and that I don't know what to do. And he gave me like, I'm not initiated. So that's the main issue. So he said, okay, so you should do just simple worship, don't get crazy about that, just wash him daily, offer some food daily, and just some insect on or fire, don't do too much, that the main thing is to get in how to say in personal contact with the deity, and that's it. And I was like, okay, so, and I'm doing that since then. It's already maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. And but from time to time I listen lectures like this, about these offenses and stuff like that, and like from time to time, these thoughts comes to my mind. So what am I actually doing here? If I'm doing some nonsense, or should I just continue doing like basically what instructions I got? So what do you think about all this situation?
And how do you feel about doing this all this time? Do you feel there is some positive result of the worship you have been doing, the seva you have been doing?
Yeah, it's how to say, it's he become like a part of me. Everywhere when I'm traveling with him. I'm scheduling my daily activities, that I could do. What am I doing, and yeah, I don't even imagine life differently. But on the other hand, I'm thinking that you might get used to any activity. So I'm not sure if I'm just got used to that, I don't know, like some kind of any activity, or it's actually some personal
And
connection.
it's only a deity of Krishna, or is Krishna with someone else?
No, just Krishna.
Okay. So yes, of course, as you say, one may get accustomed to everything and anything, but of course that may require certain introspection from your side to see if you feel that this daily practice that you have been conducted during these years has been really helpful. I was not asking if you got accustomed or not, but how do you feel internally that's affecting your daily practice? I personally wouldn't say that you go mad after paranoia because of being an aparadi and so on, because I wouldn't take it like that. But also, yes, what I will recommend in time, again, I'm not your guru, so I those things should be spoken with someone that is your guru or someone who you aspire to become the disciple of, because it's a very personal thing, as you mentioned. No? But what I could say eventually, it's not something that has to be done now, but at one point, generally, we don't worship Krishna alone as a deity, but generally he's with Radha or he's with Balaram, depending on particular case. I'm not saying, again, it's useless what you are doing. I'm not saying that, but my point is, eventually in time, sometimes that may help you to conceive in one particular direction. Of course, one can start doing so mentally, because I don't think you are worshiping Krishna and thinking Krishna exists alone by himself in Vrindavan. There's nobody else around him. So naturally, one can project a particular environment around him in the worship, daily worship. So I will say that you can continue doing what you are doing. I won't go into the extreme paranoia of apparatus, things like that. But I will say, of course, in time, if you get the blessings of receiving Harinam and Diksha eventually by some sadhu, of course, under her guidance, there will be some particular things to consider in connection to worship, and then you may have to do some adjustments for better, for always, never for less than what you are receiving already. So that will be my little advice at a distance, if you will, and not knowing maybe further details of yourself and the daily situation. Again, it's a very personal thing, but I hope that may have helped a little bit to your situation there. Okay, something else, another question, comment?
Maharaj.
Yes, Brigupad?
Dandavat Pranam.
Yeah.
I have a question about something you mentioned about Kirtan in the recap in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something you had said before also, that when doing Kirtan, one shouldn't mention the guru, one's own guru, because that could be exclusive, and other people might not feel welcome, and so on. And that would also refer to saying pranam mantras. But one thing that we've been doing here, and I would like to hear your opinion about this, Maharaj. One thing that we've been doing here in Finland when we have gatherings with many people from different sanghas is that when we do the Mangalacharana first, before starting the Kirtan, we say all the guru, all the disciples, all the devotees, they will say the pranam mantra of their own guru. So that there might be some guru from ISKCON, our Guru Maharaj, my Guru Maharaj, Narayan Maharaj, some others. What do you think about this?
Well, that's interesting. I never heard about that practice, but I'm not saying it's heterodox or something like that. It's interesting because it goes in line with the principle behind the point that I was making, which is, again, do not make anyone feel out, if you will. I mean, all the particular faith is being properly addressed and honored and included. So I appreciate what you are doing that in that way. Of course, if you can even extend the idea and say, well, but there may be some other participants in the kirtan that we are not seeing, some invisible entities descending to be part, and they have their own gurus, and we are not reciting their pranam mantra. Well, we may say, okay, but we give them a turn, and invisibly they are reciting their pranam mantra, their particular gurus there, and everyone. So again, it's not something to go neurotic, but the very gist of principle behind is what I mentioned. So I agree. I have no problem if that's done in that particular way, or sometimes the same principle applies before giving Harikatha. Sometimes one may give personally my Mangalacharan. It's not that I pronounce just a generic Mangalacharan, as you see before my lectures, not the direct pranam mantra of my Guru Maharaj, in order to include all the present, but sometimes that can take the form of reciting the pranam mantra of your Guru Maharaj, but also reciting the pranam mantra of the guru of those present at that particular moment. Of course, nowadays with online lectures, that may get a little bit more difficult. You don't know who is there and whose guru is everyone, but yeah, the principle is to properly honor. So at least I personally, I agree with what you are doing there. So it's a nice standard. It's the same thing taking another form, basically. No, the main point is not to neglect that principle, whatever form it may take. So, but thank you for sharing the testimony and finished testimony there. Okay, there's one question from Onkar, so we can go with that one to close our session. You can unmute yourself, Onkar.
Jai Maharaj, thank you for the class.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, it's kind of puzzling me for a while now, because it seems like to me from all the scriptures and all the ways that people worship deities in the past, all the acharyas, that it's very obvious to me that we're to establish the Ishtadev that we worship as our form of the Lord, as said in the Bhagavatam, and we have that concept in our hearts when we're worshiping, like say Krishna Balaram, Dauji Gopal here in Madhuban. But so many devotees have so many different deities in their altar, say their grihastha. Might have. I saw somebody in Saranagati, and it's not a criticism. It was beautiful altar and everything. I'm just having a hard time understanding them having. I think they had over 10 different sets of deities. There was all kinds from Jagannath to Radha Krishna and what have you. So how is that to be understood? I mean, I don't know if you understand or if you can answer in that way. How is one to understand? Like, what is the mentality of a person who has 10 different deities? How are they ever going to establish the Ishtadev? Or if that even is the purpose?
Yeah, I was actually planning to speak about that next class, but I will speak now since you make the question, and of course we can share some further ideas next Monday. But yeah, sometimes we see like some multi-portal to different realms, if you will. No, even not only, let's say, Braja Lila, but we may have Raja Lila, Gaur Lila, Vishnu Tattva, Narayan, Ram Lila. So Personally, I do not agree with that. Of course, each case and each situation, we have to analyze the details of that, how the deity came, blah, blah, blah. But for me, it's important to have a clear conception of the altar, because as we mentioned, the altar is a particular portal, particular window to a particular realm. So that should be really properly established, because if not, they may create some conceptual hodgepodge where you have even developed this idea of the more deities I have, the more mercy or something like that. And really, you don't have any clear conception about how to worship, what's the mood. Because if you have in the same altar Ramachandra, Nrsimhadev, Mahaprabhu, Radha Krishna, Krishna Balaram, I mean, what's the mood there? I mean, Santa Rasa, basically, something equanimity, because there are so many things to say. So in those cases, generally, as we have seen in many places, they have separate altars for different deities. Now you will see separate altars. That's ideal. I mean, the other day we went to some temple, South Indian temple, another Sampradaya, but even they respect this idea. They have Venkateshwar or Vishnu in the same main altar, but they have different altar for Nrsimhadev, Hanuman, Kartikeya, so on. So you can see a particular portal of reality there and there and there. So personally, I prefer a more minimalistic approach. When you have one main deity, and of course there may be the pictures of the parampara. In some lineages, there do not even have the pictures of the parampara, which is something more established with Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur, trying to emphasize this point of approaching the deity through the Vaishnava, through the parampara, and projecting to serve eternally the deity and serving eternally the parampara as well. But sometimes that's not there, so that can be not, no problem. But yeah, and for example, even in our particular tradition, I don't know, we have worship Radha Krishna. But ideally, you shouldn't mix other deities. Now, the other day, for example, here we had the mercy of receiving the Shilas that were worshipped at Karnamrita Prabhu. They were sent to North Carolina, and they will be put under the care of local devotees in the community here. So most of them were Shalagram Shilas, but there was a pair of Giriraj Shilas, which Karnamrita Prabhu worshipped them as Kanuram, which is another name for Dauji Gopal or Krishna Balaram. So here the devotees, the Shilas came here to the place I'm staying now, to Subal Prabhu's house. So the Shilas were welcome, they were put in the altar, but like a natural thing, they come and they were put in the altar. The Shilas of Kanuram will be eventually worshipped by Madan Gopal Prabhu, so they were delivered to him, I think, today. But during this 2 days, they were all of them in the altar. But I say to Subal, sorry, I don't want to disturb your archan, but Kanuram are Krishna Balaram. And if you put them in the altar we have here Radha Sarat Bihari, which is Radha and Krishna. So if you have Radha and Krishna, ideally you shouldn't have Krishna Balaram in the same altar, because Balaram is the elder brother of Krishna, he's Dauji. So Radha and Krishna cannot have their intimate lila with the presence of the elder brother. They will be inhibited. So and I was saying to him, of course, jokingly, I say, okay, if you want to have Kanuram for this 2 days there, just for you to know, Radha and Krishna cannot have their intimate lila these 2 days. So we were laughing, of course, and he agreed. And of course, we took Kanuram to some other place next to Tulasi, some other altar, if you will. But these are subtle considerations that in the beginning we may not pay attention to that. I may just think, mercy of Krishna, I have this deity, and I have Ladu Gopal, and Nrsimhadev, and Ramachandra, and Hanuman, and Mahaprabhu, and 3 sets of Radha Krishna, and 108 shalagrams. I may have this more idea of the more, the better. And that's not necessarily like that. Sometimes that may create a multi-branched conception that does not get into focus in any direction. So ideally, we should have one particular deity according to whatever our affinity is or our guru's instruction is. Or if we don't have a deity, of course, we worship some particular form of the Lord according to the shelter of Srila Gurudev. But yeah, personally, of course, sometimes you go to India and there are so many altars with so many deities, or sometimes they have 4 sets of Radha and Krishna. But there are some particular cases there I don't think it's wrong. Sometimes there's a big set of deities, smaller set for certain Abhishek or Julan Yatra or whatever, or some deities that were worshipped by, I don't know, you go to Radha Damodar temple, there are different sets of Radha Krishna worshipped by Jiva Goswami, Baladev Vidyabhushan, Krishnadas Kaviraj. So no problem, it's not redundant, if you will. But to mix different types of moods in the altar, that's another thing. No? So I will say, I will recommend, of course, everything at the end, it's up to one's own guru and what she instructs the disciple. But generally, the general idea is that you should try to take care of the concept in that particular portal, if you will. So the worshiper can really enter there, because that's the whole idea of Arcana. You are to enter into the altar. You are to serve there forever. So for that, Sambandha first is required, proper conceptual orientation, and only then we will have proper Avideya and what to speak, proper Prayojan. So these are some of the words, so I hope that helps. Okay, so thank you very much to all of you. Srila Gurudev ki jai, Shriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Shri Varatri ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premananda Haribo, Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaiva cha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Haribo.